Vermintide 3, now in space. Or Darktide, as some people are calling it for reasons that have frankly passed me entirely by. I am at least half joking, but this is, of course, Fatshark's latest offering in the genocide genre, or horde murder genre, if you will, where you enter a mission and you travel from point A to point B while slaughtering tremendous quantities of zombies along the way. If you played Left 4 Dead or Vermintide 1 or 2, you are going to have a pretty damn good idea of what this game has to offer for you. And that is both a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. On the good side, it means that what you're getting here is essentially more Vermintide. On the bad end, it also means that all you're really getting here is more Vermintide. But in 40k this time around, as the game hasn't really managed to introduce the kind of sweeping changes that I probably would have liked to see from such a drastic setting change. 40k is a far more ranged, combat-focused setting than Vermintide, albeit not exclusively so, of course. And though there have been some changes to facilitate at least a bit more in the way of ranged combat, this is still very much so a melee-focused video game. So, before we head into some gameplay and my wider thoughts on the game, I want to show you the quest hub here, for, if nothing else, the game looks absolutely brilliant. The Fatshark team has nailed down the aesthetic style of 40k very, very well, and the enormous hive city that you are going to be fighting throughout the game also looks great, as you'll see throughout the gameplay. The hub area is probably the weakest of all the Vermintide games, in large part because you can't jump. That was part of the fun. As ridiculous as it sounds, that was genuinely part of the fun of exploring the hub world, wandering around it and finding new and strange looking things, and we're like, oh god, what's that? What'll that do? Is that some kind of DLC? Is that a story expansion? I wonder what's down the stairs. And then, spending time trying to climb the various beams and rafters and weird shit. Whereas here, you can't do that, and you don't have a weapon either, but these are relatively minor complaints, obviously. You've got, let me head over to the weapons shop, actually, that's the better place to start. The game has a level system where you level up from level 1 to 30. Along the way, you will be given various cosmetics that will make your character look less like a hobo and more like a veteran warrior. And you also gain feats up to level 30, as mentioned right here. The feats themselves are not great, in my opinion. Most of them don't do enough and don't really affect your playstyle over much. Like in Essence Harvest, replenish 30% toughness over 5 seconds on getting a warp charge. Warp Absorption, replenish 10% toughness when you kill an enemy with a warp attack. Quietude, replenish 5% toughness for each 10% of peril quelled. These are just different ways to regain a bit of toughness, and that's about it. They don't really change all that much. So this is on a kill, this is on an active decreasing of your peril, so you need to build peril to get it, so you might as well get it immediately anyways. And this is when you kill an enemy with a warp attack, so that might also work, I believe, with the Force Staffs, I think, so that might have a lot more synergy with that. But again, they all do the same thing, and it's nothing particularly big or drastic. Tragically, you cannot change your psychic ability at all. It's always going to be a force push, which is a little bit sad. You do have some other psychic attacks, but they are bound to your weapons. So, for example, the Rifthaven Mark II Purgato's Force Staff here has a charged attack ability. In this case, I believe, is this the flamethrower? I think this might be the flamethrower right here. You've also got a lightning bolt thrower, and you've got one that sends out charged balls of energy that explode, kind of like grenades. Personally, I generally prefer the ranged shooty guns, honestly, because they don't build up your peril. If you get 100% peril, you just die, and you build up peril really goddamn quick, and then you need to quell it relatively slowly by holding down R, so most of the time I find that a fully automatic lasgun will do as much damage, and usually a hell of a lot more, frankly, without the need to quell constantly. As you level up, you will also gain access to new weapons in the store here. Now, the store is randomly generated, I think every hour or so, with new weapons. They might be absolutely useless, or they might be ridiculously great, as the weapon stats are also randomly generated. Now, that shit is hardcore cancer, by the way, because it means that you don't know what kind of a weapon you're going to be getting. So this is my current weapon, right? This is the weapon currently on display. So it's got way more damage. It's got less mobility. What is mobility, you might ask? I don't know. The game doesn't tell me. This is one of those Fatshark games. At least they added in a percentage measure at the end here. That's nice, at least. But, you know, collateral, stability, I don't know, damage is fairly self-explanatory, as is ammo. And yes, the amount of ammunition your weapon has is also randomly generated, which is, again, some pretty hardcore cancer, frankly. Because the ammo is relatively scarce in the game, and so you need a gun with a high ammo capacity. But you might not get that as, well, this one's not actually too bad. It's straight up worse than this one, but I have seen some weapons with just absolutely abysmal ammo capacity. Yeah, this one's kind of a good example of it. 30 and 184 for, well, still comparable to less damage. The damage too, by the way, that is from weapon to weapon. So this gun having 51% damage is not the same as 56% damage on this gun, which is also really retarded, because it... God, basically, you've got to buy the weapon and try it out to figure out what kind of damage it does, which is not a very good idea in my opinion. But this gun does appear to be just pretty much straight up superior to my one. Punishment salvo plus 10% weak spot damage on second and third shots in a salvo. Is it a it's a fully automatic, so I don't know what salvo means specifically here, but you know, there you go. I'll take it, I guess. And it is better than this one. 5% power for 1.2 seconds on close range kills is alright. It could actually be a fairly decent horde clearer, but I'd rather take the 20% more ammo, obviously, so I'm gonna pick that up. One of the issues too here is if you've got, say, a force staff that you really, really like, or a weapon you really, really like, and you start leveling up and you don't get a new one, well, you're shit out of luck and you're just kind of gonna suck it until the shop regenerates and gives you a good one. You can also purchase some cosmetics here, though not a tremendous amount, and they're basically just retextures of the ones you can already get. If you want actually nice looking gear,
Got the answers,
you guessed it, you gotta go to the in-game cash shop, because this is a full-priced game with microtransactions, of course. Because it is the current year. And because it is the current year as well, Fatshark has also elected to do one of the most cancerous things in video gaming. Namely, giving you premium currency, which never matches the amount you need. So the smallest amount is 500. Okay, let's see if there's anything that's cost 500 for the seller. 400, 700, 400, 800, 2,400. Alright, well, that doesn't work. What about the big one? 2,100. That's got to buy you something good, right? Well, it's not enough for a set. So if you want a set, you're going to have to buy that and something else. And if you were to buy it and something else, well, again, you're going to be losing out. You're going to be left with Aquillas. And this is the old, well, mind-gamey trick. This is a commonly used, well, extortion tactic for free-to-play games, not fully paid-for titles, mind you, but it's always going to leave you a little bit of premium currency, so that you can go like, oh, well, if I just bought a little bit more, I could afford that, but hey, guess what? You can only buy so and so much increments, so you're always going to have a little bit too much, trying to mentally pressure you into buying more. It's a scummy tactic, but it's the current year, what can you expect? Now, if you do have a good weapon, though, that you absolutely want to keep using, you can do so by upgrading it, which is at least nice. So there is a crafting system in the game. Now, I've also got to point out that, yes, the cash shop is fully implemented. The crafting system is not. The crafting system is not fully implemented. In the full release of a premium game with a cash shop, this is bullshit. But you can upgrade the weapons. If you've got something you like the Obscurus Mark II Blaze, for example, I love the Force Sword. It's by far, in my opinion, the best melee weapon for the Psyker, and I haven't gotten a new one in absolute ages, so I'm kind of stuck with this little bastard thing. So I can then consecrate it using resources you find in mission to upgrade its rating by, again, a random amount, because it wants you to buy it the good old-fashioned way. But if I upgrade it like this, you can upgrade it again to the big boy sword, but you can't upgrade its modifiers, mind you. You just upgrade its traits and its rating, so it's not a perfect solution, but at least it is a solution, you know? But the fact that the crafting is still not implemented at launch, inexcusable. And then you've got weekly missions over here, where you can gain pseudo-premium currency. So this game has 3 layers of grind. First, you need to grind your level. When you grind your level, you gain access to harder missions so that you can get more XP and more money. As you are grinding missions, you gain more experience and you also get money. And as you level up, you gain access to better items and new weapons in the shop. That's the second level of grind, where you need to grind cash to constantly upgrade your weapons, otherwise you're going to fall behind the power curve and become, well, uncompetitive in the mission. So if you don't have the best gear, you're going to find harder missions a lot harder to do. Then you're also going to grind weekly missions to unlock this currency. And this currency, as you can see here, kill 750 dregs with range attacks, kill 750 scabs with melee. Again, the game doesn't tell you what a scab is, the game doesn't tell you what a dreg is, was it just annoying, it doesn't tell you what a monstrosity is. Again, Fatshark hates tooltips for some goddamn reason. And if you complete 5 tasks, you get an extra 1,000. This is then used to get limited time acquisitions like legendary weapons. The legendary weapons will always cost you at least a week's worth of grind or so. I think maybe, like, this is just an epic. I think you could potentially squeeze that with these missions, I think, but you'd be relatively hard-pressed to do so. And you could also buy a mystery box, which gives you a small % chance to get a, I think, there's one level above Transcendent, I think, which the mystery box gives you. So this is then the 3rd layer of grind again. And again, this shop too is updated on a weekly basis, so if there's nothing in here you like, again, you're shit out of luck and you're gonna have to wait another week. Like right now, the autogun isn't garbage. It's got a alright-ish ammo capacity, and it does hit very hard. Star Revolver, pretty pointless. Tactical Axe, I mean, it's nice, but it's straight up worse than the Force Sword, in my opinion, and the Devil Sword, which is, again, straight up worse than the Force Sword, in my opinion, so there you go.
Never mind.
Once you've fully equipped your character, you go over here to the big old mission table and you select a mission from the terminal. The missions are up for a certain amount of time and can have a series of modifiers. The primary objective here, for example, is espionage. Upload some inaccurate recon data to heretics cogitate rain down in the torrent. This is run by Sergeant Major Morrow, who will also be the NPC who will be talking you through the mission, or well, providing banter, more likely. This is a level 1 mission, so it's nice and easy. Then you've got the various pips here. Let's see if we can... this one's got a modifier. No, that's primary. Modifier... there we go. That's the modifier. So the modifier here is a low-intensity engagement zone. Recon indicates lower enemy concentration in the mission zone. Expect fewer high-intensity engagements and specialists. So these can be really great because it might allow you to do a higher difficulty mission a lot easier. In this case, less specialists, easier mission. In this case, you've got a high intensity engagement zone, which will send even more specialists your way. Now, it does increase your reward by a little bit, but not by a tremendous amount. Like, can we find, is there a 3 with a modifier here? No, otherwise I could have shown you. But it does boost the mission reward a bit. Not enough to be worth it, honestly, but a bit. And then you also have, occasionally, secondary objectives, like recover 3 missing scriptures for additional rewards. In Vermintide, where you had the books and the tomes and stuff, that is no longer in the game as a normal thing, but they can be in as a modifier, where if you get one of them, you get a tiny bit of reward, if you get 2, you get a bit more, and if you get all 3, then you get the big payoff. You've also got the Sea's Grimoire, as you can see here, as well. Right. Now that I've explained to you most of the, back-endy stuff, let's get into some pre-recorded gameplay, and I'll talk to you a little bit about my more general impressions, shall we? Rightio then, so let us begin with the elephant in the room, the grinding requirements. I am not a huge fan of grind in games like this. In Vermintide, the grind was primarily revolving around getting weapons at the ends of missions, which would unlock higher difficulty missions. And the higher difficulty missions were mostly there for an additional challenge. Whereas here, the game has a bit of a pacing problem in that the Pip 1 missions are way too goddamn easy and incredibly boring. The Pip 2 missions aren't a whole lot better, and the game finally gets fun around level 3 Pip missions, which are right about the right level of challenge, to the point where pickup groups can do it, and an organized group can probably do it fairly easily, but with enough resistance for it to be satisfying. The problem is, getting there is going to take you like 10 hours, which is not a lot of fun, and worse still is the fact that the weapon locks off certain weapons behind a level barrier, so you can't get access to certain fun weapons until you put X amount of hours into the game. Not good game design, in my opinion, as for example, the fully automatic lasgun, which is my favorite ranged weapon so far, that's a level 17, 18 weapon, I think. You don't get access to any of the psychic staffs for the Psyker until like level 14, 15 odd. Again, that's more than 10 hours into the game. Which really does force you to kind of raise the question, how many hours are you supposed to put into a game before it finally gets fun? I think they would have been better off with, first and foremost, have all of the weapons unlocked immediately, but then just, reduce the gear score of the weapons. Now, this may very well lead to some weapons being kinda useless, like, for example, I think the Force Sword is just straight up the best melee weapon, no questions about it, but that is a balancing issue, frankly. That shouldn't be a tier issue, that should be a, you need to give more things to the other weapons to make them compete kind of issue, or maybe you made the Force Sword too good kind of issue, rather than a, level barrier problem. I also think that the leveling process itself could definitely be sped up, because frankly, when you get to max level, it doesn't take so long that the grind is in and of itself an experience. It's not fun to level up. It's not a journey. There is a story which does unlock as you level up, but it's not much of one. It's not worth the effort by any stretch of the imagination. So in reality, what you're trying to do in this game is get to the fun weapons, get to the fun difficulties, and then have fun with the gameplay. The other stuff around it is, frankly, just a barrier between you and the fun. So I think maybe reducing the average length of the missions would also do quite well. Currently, the average length is about 30-odd minutes, roundabout slightly less. Maybe try and shave off 10 minutes. Make it a quicker run so that you can get that little good dopamine hit of yeah, we beat a mission, I got experience, I got a weapon, I got a reward, I got crafting material, yay! That would help a lot as well, since right now, it just feels like a bit of a treadmill, if I'm to be honest, and that's not the feeling you're looking for. And speaking of the treadmill, the gameplay itself. Now, at Pip 3, the game can actually be a great deal of fun, and it can be really cool to finish a mission that you feel like you did well in. Now, by the way, they've removed the scoreboard, so you can't tell if you did well, because I guess people got bullied because they did poorly, I suppose. Now, I do believe Fatshark did say that they were going to add it in, but they haven't. There is also, incidentally, no solo player lobbies. You cannot play it by yourself. You have to join a mission, and the mission, as far as I know, is always going to be open for other people to hot join, so you best have some good friends. But the gameplay itself, to get back to the point, the gameplay is very Vermintide. It doesn't have a whole lot of weight to it, which does annoy me. It's very slishy-slashy. You wade into hordes of zombies and you cut. There's not a whole lot of impact there at all. Meanwhile, you get torn down quick playing as some of the more squishier classes. The Psyche, for example, the toughness shield, so let me explain the toughness system, because this is kind of a cool system, but it doesn't work like the game tells you. You have a secondary bar, which is blue. This bar regenerates when you are nearby friends, and doesn't regenerate at all unless on certain perks if you're away from friends. This is to encourage you to stick together. This is a very good idea, as it encourages squad cohesion, a crucial part of playing the game. It also allows you to not be torn down instantly by the hit scan universal sniper ranged enemies that'll spawn in groups of 10, which is one of the parts of the gameplay we'll get to in a moment, by the way. But it does not block all melee damage, or all range damage either, I think. It blocks a percentage based upon your, I think it's the toughness stat or something. Again, the game doesn't really explain to you the stats, which is another one of the problems. But this means that even if you have full shield, quote-unquote, you will still take chip damage continuously. And the enemies will bust through your shield very quickly, doing damage to your real health bar, meaning that the enemies feel really goddamn powerful. And since the game doesn't have a good feedback system for telling you when you're low on health, although they did implement at least a little bit of a heartbeaty sound when you're extremely low now, or about to die permanently, you keep getting the feeling that you will just die, and you're like, what? I was on full health, and whereas in reality you were on like a quarter or something. It also doesn't help that close quarters enemies hit a lot harder than the range one, adding to that kind of nuked down feeling, as you pretty much have to go into melee. There is not a whole lot of ammunition scattered throughout the level, and even weapons with huge ammo capacity like lasguns will run dry frequently, particularly when you have multiple people on your team using ranged weapons. Maybe if like only one, maybe two people on the team were using ranged weapons, you could theoretically fight using nothing but ranged weapons. But that would be difficult, particularly also as virtually all of the weapons have really long reload animations, forcing you into close quarters combat. This was an enormous missed opportunity, in my opinion, because it does reduce the game to Vermintide in space, rather than a completely different game experience. And really, Fatshark here had an opportunity to corner two markets. They can continue to keep people who are interested in good close quarters combat happy with Vermintide, which is still alive and kicking and receiving content to this day, whilst also providing people who are more of a fan of shooter games with another alternative game, more focused on cover and range combat with a pinch of melee here and there, but it shouldn't have been the primary focus. It should have been more Left 4 Dead than it is Vermintide, but it isn't, which is a bit annoying to me. There are also some other really frustrating design decisions as well, because, alright, I'm complaining a lot here, because I'm trying to get the complaining kind of out of the way, because, how do I put it? There are, the way I would describe the game, from my opinion, is that there are moments of real fun here and there. There are genuine moments of real entertainment and real fun in the game, where you're really getting that sense of accomplishment, where the difficulty feels just right. You've got a good weapon, you're gunning down a horde, you're slaughtering enemies in melee, you're defeating bosses, you're popping brain as the Psyker, which makes you feel very powerful later game, and the Psyker is practically a must-have class for anything above Pip 2, in my opinion, really, as you're murdering ogres and shit and cutting your way through the Hive City. But at the same time, there are also moments of absolute unyielding frustration as you return to the hub after 30-minute long slog, and they still don't have a new weapon for you, and so you go into a new mission, and you're just grinding out the XP bar, hoping to get a good gun, or hoping to get a good sword, and some missions are very poorly designed. The Auspex scanning, for example, I avoid like the plague. The on-spec scanning is a system where you take out an on-specs and you have to look through the environment for things to interact with and scan. And there's usually 3 to 4 to 5 of these. In certain areas, you've got to do this up to 3 times in more or less the same area to finally move forward, even as you are being constantly attacked by hordes of enemies. And whilst you're carrying your specs, of course, you can't carry your weapons. This is not a fun game mode, and one that most people don't even seem to understand how the hell works. Even at the end of beta, I still run into entire teams which have no idea how the all-spec scanning functions. Probably because everyone avoids it because nobody likes it. The other objectives are fine, like defending the little hacking thing and playing a little mini-game is alright, you know, it doesn't take a whole amount of time, and you're usually only asked to do it once or twice to do the hacking. And the hacking doesn't require you to move around the map, and it doesn't take an unreasonable amount of time. You also need to carry canisters to objectives to slot them into a thing to make a doodah open. That too is fine, I don't mind. The general gameplay loop in those cases it's okay if a tiny bit long, in my opinion. Something that adds to the frustration too, by the way, is crashes. Now, your mileage is going to vary drastically here, because the first version of the beta, I streamed this, I could barely complete a mission. I think I crashed in 2 missions for every mission I actually completed. That was pain. Indescribable pain. Luckily, they have now added in the ability to rejoin the mission, which is a godsend, and the crashing, at least for me, is a lot more stable. Now I only crash like once every 3 missions, which is still not great, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was. But for other people, it crashes near constantly. The Steam forums, are near filled with people complaining about non-stop crashes. The performance issues too vary a great deal from player to player. My game runs smooth as butter. I have no problems with it whatsoever. A solid FPS, no issues. But for people with lower-end systems, it apparently runs like absolute garbage. And the minimum system requirements too, definitely check those out because they are, fairly hefty, shall we say. And in the game's defense, the interiors are beautiful. Again, as I mentioned, they've done a great job of capturing the spirit of 40k. They've also done a very good job in terms of enemy variety this time around. There are a lot of different specialists, which is cool, although it can also be painful, as there's also going to be a lot of different specialists attacking you. If you're used to, like, Vermintide, where, like, 1 or maybe 2, if you're really unlucky, come at you, this game is going to treat you rather roughly, as specialists usually come in packs at high difficulties of at least 2, and often 4 or more. I don't know what kind of AI director the game has, but it must have some kind of it. Actually, see, here's the thing. AI director. That was the term coined by Left 4 Dead for the AI that was trying to get you through the mission, whilst also giving you enough of a challenge. So its job was to make it tough, but always winnable. It didn't always succeed, obviously. Sometimes way too easy, sometimes way too hard. But if you were doing poorly, it would give you medkits, and if you were doing well, it would spawn a tank to come eat your ass out. In this game, the AI director exists only to make your life miserable, it seems like, as sometimes I've seen cases where we've run into like 2 ogres and 4 enemy specialists at the same time with a horde. It's like, okay, that was ridiculous. And as for resources, well, in terms of ammo, you feel starved almost constantly. If you try to use nothing but a ranged weapon, you're going to have a very hard time. Health is a bit better. There are enough health stations scattered throughout the mission to replenish you and to take care of corruption, which is permanent health damage as well, which some enemies can inflict on you. And there tends to be at least 2 or 3 med kits through the mission as well, which is alright, but it feels like it's always like that, rather than the game actually responding to you. And speaking of, this is one of those little annoying things as well, because the game doesn't really do a whole lot different. Again, looping somewhat back to the Vermintide problem, but the horde shooter genre really hasn't had much of a change since, well, its inception, practically. You could certainly argue that Vermintide obviously was far more heavily melee focused, and that was a change. And yeah, in certain elements, it absolutely was. It was a bigger change than Darktide is to the formula. But you're always running around with 4 characters. You're always using the same kind of sort of mix of melee and range, but to a lesser or greater degree. And the abilities in Vermintide aren't that engaging. Like the Ogryn has a charge, which is nice. The Zealot 2 has a charge. The Veteran has the ability to boost his damage for a nanosecond, and the Psyker has the only really interesting one, which allows him to pop the heads of targets, dealing an enormous amount of damage, making him a tremendous sniper of specials. Now that's a cool ability, and it's a shame that the others don't have equally cool and interesting abilities. Like the Veteran's one in particular is just boring. Increasing your range damage for like 5 seconds is not particularly interesting. It makes sense, I guess, but something more creative would be much, much better in my opinion. Hell, maybe give him like a focus mode, which like for 3 seconds he only does headshots or something stupid like that. Something that makes him feel like a complete badass. Something more than just a 5% damage increase, you know? Actually, I think it's 50, but you get my drift. It's not that engaging. I think it could have done more with the formula. Maybe try and play around with squad-based gameplay, for example. Not necessarily more players, although that would be cool too, like a 6-player approach. Maybe with different missions, one mission type for 4 players, one mission type for 6 players, maybe raids for 8 or more, etc. But maybe give you NPCs to tag along with you, a little bit of Republic Commando style maybe. Or maybe making it a pure shooter game where basically all of the enemies, except for maybe zombies, have ranged weaponry, making it a pure first-person shooter experience. Maybe that could have been interesting. Maybe leaning more heavily into the special abilities, giving each character several special abilities, maybe unlocking them with the feats, for example. I'm just kind of throwing out ideas here, but I would have liked something a bit fresher than what Darktide is currently offering. And the NPC idea in particular, the game keeps telling you about this enormous war that is going on. Like the entire hive is at war. There's Imperial Guard regiments everywhere. There are tanks. There are all manners of cool shit going on. But you never get to see it. The closest you ever get is to see a Valkyrie land and disgorge like 6 guardsmen. That's it. That's your grand battle. As the rest of the time, it's the same old, your squad of 4 unbelievably blessed individuals blasting their way through innumerable hordes of enemies, racking up like 1,000 kills plus per mission. Especially as the AI director, to give it its charitable title, will continue to spawn shit in at you, and sometimes in more blatant ways than others. I have lost count of the amount of times I have seen enemies just literally pop into existence, or the amount of times I've entered a room and there's been a bunch of enemies there literally standing directly on top of each other, as in clipping into each other, because the spawn locator is right underneath their feet and they haven't had enough time to disperse yet. Or the amount of time the game has literally just dumped enemies behind me, directly off camera, directly behind me, and then attacked me. This is something the game does whenever you're too far away from your allies. It will just spawn shit on top of you, which is, again, to try and make you keep squad cohesion, but the game could at least pretend that it isn't doing it, rather than making it quite so blatant. Okay, so we've gone over most of the large things here, so let me get to some overall conclusions here, shall I? Because there are a lot of good things about the game. Like, the gameplay is by no means bad. Like, the gameplay loop isn't bad. It's just, for me, the game is just kind of boring. Now, if this is your first experience with this kind of game, you'll probably love the hell out of it, absolutely. Like, if you're a 40k fan who didn't play Vermintide at all, but you want to play this, go for it. You're probably going to love it. It's probably going to be everything you want. If you're a Vermintide veteran, the game doesn't really give you that much of a reason to switch over. It's, in most cases, just more Vermintide. And Vermintide has, well, better melee combat, honestly, and it has better characters too. Seeing as you make your own character in this game, they do lack a lot of the personality of Vermintide. There is also a painful amount of strong female woman simping in the game as well. There is a lot of strong female characters which your NPCs constantly simp for in in-game dialogue. There's an angry bitch of a tech priest, for example, that constantly complains at you, and there is a voice line in-game where the character goes like, "Oh boy, that tech priest is a little testy, eh?" And another character pipes in and goes like, "You shouldn't say that. She's got a lot on her mind, okay? You shouldn't mistake a little bit of stress for hostility." And then the other guy's like, "Oh, well, you know, I wouldn't want to pick a fight with her. She's awfully tough." Like, oh, F me. But that's a minor annoyance, really. If you were looking for something completely new, then this is not gonna be it. Not by any stretch of the imagination. If you're looking for just a fun horde shooter, this will suffice to an extent. It does depend a little bit. Like, if you want a fun horde shooter on a Left 4 Dead with a lot of shooting, this will probably not satisfy you, because you are going to have to grind for the weapons with the kind of ammo capacity that you are going to need to even have the slightest hope of going through a mission just blasting. You also need to pick your class appropriately. It's not Veteran, by the way, it's Ogryn. Ogryn has some of the best shooting gameplay because the Ripper Gun is great and the Stubber is even more fantastic, really. The Psyker is kind of invaluable, frankly, particularly on higher difficulties, but his gameplay isn't great. You do feel like a real asset to the team, you absolutely do, with the ability to pop elites and do massive damage to bosses via force-feeding your psychic power via the Force Sword, which again is one of the reasons why the Force Sword is just absolutely the best goddamn weapon. And the Veteran is just not that interesting. Again, his ability is kind of boring, and you don't have enough ammo to really go full-ranged combat most of the time, unless you're going to stick to the one-shot-at-the-time lasgun, which is also kind of boring. The Zealot is a bit more interesting, because they have a flamethrower, which is a slight deviation from the gameplay, but the flamethrower is... well, it's more of a ranged stun than it was what you would expect for a flamethrower. It also fires flames as a gas and a projectile rather than what it should be doing, which is a liquid, spraying flames all over the place. It should be more of an area denial tool, and currently it's more of a staggering weapon than anything else, which is a bit of a disappointment. The Psyker 2 could have used a lot more actual psychic abilities than just push, but... well, the Psyker is already one of the better classes, so I guess giving him too much toys would also be unacceptable. If I were to do a full-on hard conclusion, then at the end, basically it is this. If you're already a big fan of Vermintide and you're still playing it to this day, there's no real reason for you to migrate over to Darktide. If you're a fan of Vermintide that just wants more Vermintide, but in 40k, the game will do that for you, but you'll probably feel a little bit of a hollow feeling in your stomach, like, yeah, this is cool, but Vermintide was better. And hey, Darktide might get a lot better too, with continuous updates. If you're a 40k fan, however, who hasn't played Vermintide and you just want to shoot endless hordes of heretics in cool 40k environments, the game is absolutely for you, no doubt about it. If you're neither of these, then I'd probably just say play Left 4 Dead, honestly. It'll be a hell of a lot cheaper, and you won't have to stress out with the grinding or anything like that. You'll just get straight into it. So if it's a horde shooter you want, yeah, go play Left 4 Dead. And as a fine little thing as well, I've gotta just repeat my critique one more time. A fully functional cash shop in a premium $60 goddamn game with a special edition for another $20 on top of that, with premium in-game items, and you've added in the cash shop before you've even finished the game because the crafting isn't fully implemented, and you do the churlish, cuntish thing of never giving enough premium currency for a clean purchase. All of these are big, big, big asshole moves that the company should be deeply ashamed of. So if that matters to you in a purchasing decision, take it into consideration. With all of that being said, I am probably not gonna play a whole lot more Darktide, because honestly, getting the footage for this review, getting up to a level where I could have a relatively informed opinion of the game, it was mostly a chore for me, but I was also never a tremendous fan of Vermintide, so take that for what it is, my highly personal opinion, my highly taste-based opinion. Right, I'll wrap it up there. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you found this informative. Until next time, have a good day.